I have a confession, the wizard says, his hand pressed against his chest where something dark pulses beneath the skin. There's a Netherese destruction orb lodged in my chest, and if I don't feed it magic, it will detonate with enough force to level a city the size of Waterdeep. But that's not the truly devastating part of Gale's story. The real tragedy is how he got it there. Because this brilliant, charismatic wizard didn't find this curse in some ancient tomb or receive it from a dark ritual. He did it to himself, for love. Love for a goddess who groomed him as a young man, made him her chosen, became his lover, and then abandoned him the moment his devotion led him to make one catastrophic mistake. A goddess who would later ask him to kill himself as his only path to redemption. This is the story of Gale Dekarios, the Wizard of Waterdeep. And before we're done, you'll understand why the question isn't whether he'll become a god or die trying. The question is whether he'll learn that he was always enough, exactly as he was. Let's settle in. This tale winds through divine romance, ancient catastrophe, and the hardest lesson any of us ever has to learn, that the love we chase can destroy us, while the love we need has been beside us all along. The evening grows quiet around us now. Let your mind drift into the forgotten realms, where a wizard once touched the stars and learned that some heights are too dangerous to reach. Gale Dekarios was born with magic singing in his blood. While other children in Waterdeep played with wooden swords and dreamed of adventure, young Gale could feel something deeper, something that pulsed beneath the surface of the world like a second heartbeat. This was the weave, the manifestation of magic itself, the living extension of Mystra, the goddess of magic. From his earliest memories, Gale could not simply access the weave, but compose it. Where other apprentices labored for years to master simple cantrips, Gale moved, through magical education as a virtuoso, might dance through a familiar melody. His teachers at the prestigious Blackstaff Academy in Waterdeep spoke of him in hushed, awed tones. They called him a prodigy. They called him exceptional. They called him the finest student they had seen in generations. But for all his magical gifts, Gale remained in many ways an ordinary boy. He loved wine and good conversation, though perhaps the wine came later. He enjoyed cooking, finding in the precise measurements and transformative alchemy of cuisine something that reminded him of spellcraft. He wrote poetry, though he would later admit with self-deprecating humor that his verses were perhaps better forgotten. And like many children, he desperately wanted a pet. When his parents denied him a kitten, citing concerns he was too young for such responsibility, 10-year-old Gale decided to solve the problem in his own particular way. If he could not have a cat, he would simply summon one. What happened next should have been impossible. Summoning creatures from other planes requires knowledge and power far beyond what any child should possess. But Gale, even at 10 years old, was no ordinary child. Through sheer force of will and unprecedented magical talent, he reached across the boundaries between worlds and conjured Tara. Tara was no ordinary cat. She was a Tresim, a magical creature with the body of a feline but sporting elegant wings that allowed her to soar through the air. Tresims possessed intelligence far beyond normal animals, the ability to detect poison and see invisible things, and in Tara's case, the uncommon gift of speech. From the moment she appeared in young Gale's bedroom, summoned through sheer force of will and unprecedented magical talent, she became his constant companion. Over the years, Tara would become far more than a pet. She would become his friend, his confidant, his most loyal ally. She would stay with him through triumphs and disasters, through divine romance and cursed isolation. Long after Gale's mother, Morena Dekarios, had reconciled herself to her son's magical pet, Tara would visit her in Waterdeep, two beings bound by their love for the same brilliant, troubled wizard. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. In those early years, Gale was simply a gifted boy with a magical cat, a student whose talents had not yet attracted attention from the heavens themselves. He studied. He practiced. He grew in power and understanding, each day strengthening his connection to the weave, to that invisible tapestry of magic that connected all things. He did not yet know that his very brilliance would draw the gaze of the goddess who embodied that magic. He did not yet understand that touching the weave was, in its way, touching her. There are many ways to catch the attention of a deity. Prayer works for some, devotion draws others, sacrifice perhaps, or great deeds performed in a god's name. But Gale required none of these conventional paths, for his connection to magic itself made him visible to the one who was magic incarnate. Mystra, the goddess of magic, was far more than a distant deity receiving prayers from on high. She was the weave itself, that flowing river of magical energy that permeated nearly every corner of the world of Faerun. To touch the weave was to touch her. To manipulate magic was to interact with her very essence. And when a mortal wizard demonstrated such unprecedented natural talent, such an innate understanding of her domain, she noticed. The goddess revealed herself to Gale when he was young, though the exact timeline has sparked considerable debate. Gale himself speaks of being a wizard prodigy from an early age, who could not only control the weave, but compose it, and that this skill earned the attention of the mother of magic herself. Later, when describing their relationship to others, he refers to himself in third person as a very young man, for whom it was most certainly love. The ambiguity matters more than it might seem. Based on what we know of Mystra's other chosen throughout history, the goddess has a pattern of selecting mortals young and maintaining relationships that blur the lines between mentor, muse, and lover. What's certain is that by the time the relationship became intimate, there was already an enormous power imbalance, not just between mortal and god, but between someone who had been shaped by divine attention and the divinity that shaped them. Here's what we know for certain. Mystra came to him first as a teacher. She showed him secrets of the weave that no mortal scholar could reveal. She guided his already exceptional talents to even greater heights. Under her divine tutelage, Gale stopped being merely a gifted wizard and became something more. One of Mystra's chosen, mortals granted a deeper connection to magic itself, touched by the goddess's power and will. To be chosen by Mystra was to exist in a space between mortal and divine. The chosen could perform feats of magic that would leave even arch-wizards speechless. They became living conduits of magical energy, their very beings suffused with power that originated from the goddess herself. For Gale, this transformation was both exhilarating and overwhelming. But Mystra did not stop at mentorship. Teacher became muse. Muse became something far more intimate. The goddess and the mortal began a relationship that transcended normal boundaries between divine and human. She became, in Gale's own words, his lover. Now here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. What form did this love actually take? When asked what Mystra's attention felt like, Gale answers simply, love. But consider what Mystra actually is. She's not merely a goddess who rules over magic. She is the weave itself. Every spell cast, every magical manipulation, every wizard's touch of arcane power is, quite literally, touching her. Some scholars believe Mystra appeared to Gale in her avatar form, a physical manifestation walking among mortals. But there's another interpretation suggested by those who understand the weave's true nature. When Gale speaks of being one with the weave, when he describes Mystra showing him the secrets behind the veils, When he talks about their intimacy, he may be describing something far more alien than a traditional romance. To be intimate with Mystra could mean merging consciousness with the infinite ocean of magical potential that is her. Imagine experiencing reality itself as pleasure, knowledge as ecstasy, every spell cast as an act of connection with your beloved. For a young wizard whose entire identity was built around magic, separating his love for Mystra from his love of magic itself would be impossible. This raises an uncomfortable question. Can you truly consent to a relationship with someone who is, quite literally, the thing you need to survive as a wizard? When refusing her means refusing magic itself. But Gale, young and brilliant and desperately in love with both the goddess and what she represented, would not have asked such questions. Not then. Imagine it for a moment. Imagine being a young wizard of exceptional talent, being told by the literal embodiment of everything you love and value that you are special, that you are favored, that you have been chosen above all others. Imagine experiencing a connection so profound that you could not separate the magic you wielded from the being you loved. For Gale, Mystra was not simply his goddess or his lover. She was magic itself, the very thing that defined his existence and gave his life meaning. Is it any wonder that he loved her? Is it any wonder that he wanted to prove himself worthy of that love? For a time, perhaps years, Gale existed in a state that must have felt like a waking dream. He was young, gifted beyond measure, and beloved by a goddess. His abilities as a wizard had reached heights that others could only imagine. Those who knew him during this period spoke of feats that even arch-wizards would marvel at. He had one hand on the pulse of divinity itself. But there is a fundamental problem with relationships between mortals and gods. It is the same problem that exists in any relationship, where one party holds all the power and the other exists at their pleasure. The mortal experiences time, grows, changes, needs, wants. The goddess is eternal, unchanging, ultimately independent. What seems like forever to a human barely registers as a moment in divine experience. Gale wanted more. It is almost painful in its human simplicity. He wanted Mystra to share deeper secrets with him, to reveal more of magic's mysteries. He asked. She smiled and told him to be contented with what he already had. He asked again. She refused, gently perhaps, but firmly. The goddess of magic, who had given him so much, drew a line at what she would not share. For Gale, this refusal must have cut deep. If he was her chosen, her favored one, if they were lovers, why would she not show him everything? What was he lacking? What more did he need to prove? This is where we must understand something about Gale's nature. He was not merely talented. He was ambitious. That ambition was not inherently evil or wrong. It was the same driving force that had made him a prodigy, that had pushed him to achieve what others thought impossible. But ambition, like any powerful force, can become dangerous when it encounters limitation. Gale began to believe that if Mystra would not freely share her deepest secrets, perhaps he could prove himself worthy by bringing her a gift beyond price. If he could present her with something lost, something precious, something that demonstrated both his love and his capability as a wizard, surely then she would see him as her equal. Surely then she would give him everything he sought. His research led him to study the history of Netheril, an ancient empire of human wizards whose magical prowess had once rivaled the gods themselves. The Netherese had created flying cities, mastered magic of such power that it reshaped reality, and in their hubris had ultimately brought about their own destruction. The architect of Netheril's fall was a wizard named Karsus, perhaps the most powerful mortal spellcaster who ever lived. Karsus had created a spell of unprecedented ambition, a 12th level incantation called Karsus Avatar, which would allow him to steal divinity from a god and become a god himself. For his target, he chose the goddess of magic herself, then known as Mystra. For one brief, terrible moment, Karsus succeeded. He ascended to godhood and touched power beyond mortal comprehension. But in stealing the portfolio of magic, he assumed responsibilities he could not possibly fulfill. The goddess of magic regulates the flow of magical energy to all beings, all spells, all enchanted items throughout the world. Without this regulation, magic surged chaotically. The weave itself began to tear apart. Mystra, in her final act, sacrificed herself to sever Karsus's connection and stabilize magic. She would be reborn moments later as Mystra, but the damage was done. Karsus, overwhelmed by the divine power and the knowledge of what his folly had caused, was transformed into stone, his petrified form destined to eternally relive the moment of his greatest mistake. The flying cities of Netheril crashed to the ground, killing millions. An entire civilization ended in minutes. From this catastrophe, fragments of corrupted magic persisted. Pieces of the weave that had been touched by Karsus's failed godhood, twisted and dangerous, locked outside of time and Mystra's oversight. These fragments were incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Gale, in his research, learned of one such fragment. He discovered it had been sealed in a tome, hidden away in Waterdeep. This was his chance. This was how he would prove his love. Imagine Gale in his tower, standing before an ancient tome. His hands, which could weave spells of impossible complexity, now trembling slightly as they reached for the clasp. Tara was elsewhere, perhaps, unable to witness what came next. Or perhaps she was there, and could only watch helplessly as her beloved wizard made the choice that would define the rest of his life. The book was called A Tome of Gateways. Within it resided what Gale believed to be a fragment of primal weave, a piece of magic torn from the original goddess Mystra during Karsus's ascension, suspended in a portion of the astral plane, locked out of time. Gale believed he understood what he was dealing with. He believed his love and his exceptional abilities would allow him to retrieve this fragment safely and present it to Mystra, reuniting her with a lost part of herself. He opened the book. What happened next occurred in heartbeats, but would reverberate through years. The fragment did not sit passively waiting to be retrieved. It was alive in its way. A writhing mass of darkest shadow shot from the pages and buried itself in Gale's chest, merging with his body, embedding itself in the very core of his being. But here's the cruel twist Gale wouldn't discover until much later, until after years of suffering. The thing he thought was a lost piece of Mystra, that he could return to her, was actually corrupted. This wasn't pure weave separated from the goddess. This was Karsite weave, magic that had been twisted by Karsus's failed attempt at godhood, magic that still carried the mad ambition to supplant Mystra herself. The orb lodged in Gale's chest didn't just want to consume magic. It wanted to consume her, to replace the weave with itself. Gale's grand romantic gesture, his attempt to prove his love by returning something precious to his goddess, was actually bringing her a weapon designed for her destruction. No wonder Mystra abandoned him. From her perspective, her chosen had just infected himself with the magical equivalent of a divine assassination device. The irony must have been as bitter as it was terrifying. The orb had needs. It hungered. It consumed magical energy constantly, draining it from the weave around it, and most immediately from Gale's own connection to magic. His abilities as a wizard, once powerful enough to be called extraordinary even among Mystra's chosen, began to weaken. The The divine touch that had defined him started to fade, siphoned away by the ravenous artifact now lodged in his chest. Worse still was the orb's instability. If not continuously fed magical energy, it would detonate. The explosion would not simply kill Gale. It would obliterate everything in a massive radius. Cities, thousands of people. A catastrophe on a scale that would echo Karsus's original folly. And Mystra, the goddess whose love Gale had sought to prove? She abandoned him. He was no longer her chosen. The intimate connection they had shared was severed. The love, affair between mortal and goddess ended not with passion or tenderness, but with silence. Mystra withdrew, leaving Gale alone with the consequence of his ambition. Or so Gale believed. The truth, which he wouldn't learn for years, was more complicated. Mystra hadn't simply abandoned him to his fate. She'd been using her divine power to keep the orb dormant, feeding it carefully measured amounts of the true weave to prevent it from detonating and tearing apart reality. She was, in her way, keeping him alive. But she never told him this. She never reached out. From Gale's perspective, she simply vanished from his life, leaving him cursed and alone. One can only imagine what those first hours and days were like. The physical pain of having a destructive magical artifact embedded in one's chest. The emotional devastation of divine abandonment, not knowing she was still, in secret, keeping him alive. The dawning horror of understanding what he had become. Not a hero presenting a priceless gift to his lover, but a walking weapon of mass destruction. And through it all, the hunger. Constant, insatiable, demanding. Gale retreated to his tower in Waterdeep. What else could he do? He could not risk being among people with this thing inside him. He could not inflict his cursed presence on the world. The wizard who had once moved through the City of Splendors with confidence and pride now locked himself away, becoming a recluse in his own home. Only Tara remained with him. The Tressym who had been his companion since childhood refused to abandon him, even now. While Gale might have wished to be alone in his misery and shame, Tara was having none of it. She stayed. She hunted. She searched. Because there was a solution of sorts. A way to keep the orb from detonating. If magical energy was regularly fed to it, the artifact could be temporarily sated. Tara, using her own not inconsiderable magical knowledge and her fierce determination to save her wizard, figured out that items imbued with magic could be consumed by the orb. Enchanted rings, charmed amulets, spelled weapons. Any object that held magic within it could be broken down, its arcane energy absorbed. So began a strange, desperate ritual. Tara would fly out from the tower, searching through markets and shops, occasionally procuring magical items through means best left unexamined. She would bring them back to Gale, who would consume them in a process that was neither eating nor casting, but something in between. The magic would flow from artifact to orb, buying him another few days of stability. But magical items are not infinite, and they are not cheap. Even with Tara's help, even with whatever resources Gale's family had left him, this was not sustainable. How many enchanted rings can one wizard consume before the supply runs dry? How long before the hunger demands more than can be provided? The tower that had once been a place of study and wonder became a monument to loss. Gale's extensive library sat largely unread. His research lay abandoned. The view of the Sea of Swords that had once inspired him now seemed to mock his isolation. He had touched the stars and been cast down to earth, and the fall had broken something fundamental inside him. His mother, Morena, visited when she could. Tara made sure to check on her as well, knowing that the woman's heart broke for her brilliant, cursed son. They would speak of Gale in careful, worried tones. He was alive, yes. He was managing the condition, yes. But to call this living seemed almost cruel. Gale spent this time locked away for approximately a year. 12 months of consuming magical items, of managing the orb, of missing Mystra with an ache that mixed grief, anger, longing, and shame in equal measure. He knew what he had become in his folly. Others might call him cursed or afflicted, but Gale understood the truth. He had been arrogant. He had overreached. He had believed himself capable of handling power he did not understand, all to prove something to a goddess who had ultimately found him wanting. The man who emerged from this period was changed. Still brilliant, still capable, still possessed of more magical knowledge than most wizards would accumulate in lifetimes. But humbled, wounded, carrying both a literal and metaphorical burden that weighed on him with every breath. And then, just when it seemed this might be his fate forever, something extraordinary happened. Mind flayers attacked Waterdeep. Gale, rushing from his tower for reasons he could never quite explain, was captured and taken aboard their nautiloid ship. A tadpole was inserted behind his eye, beginning the transformation to Mind Flayer. Under any other circumstances, this would be a horror beyond imagination. But for Gale, it was almost liberating. At least now he had a different problem. At least now he had a reason to leave the tower, to seek help, to find companions. The tadpole gave him a quest, and quests have solutions. Perhaps this one would even help with the orb. When the nautiloid crashed on the Sword Coast and Gale stumbled out into a new chapter of his life, he carried with him both curse and tadpole. He was a walking catastrophe in two different ways, but he was also, for the first time in a year, hopeful, because he was no longer alone. And that, as it would turn out, would make all the difference. When adventurers first encounter Gale, he appears as a hand reaching out of a glowing purple portal, calling for help. It is such a strange introduction that it almost seems comedic. Pull the hand and out pops a wizard, slightly disheveled, extremely verbose, and clearly relieved to be extracted from whatever magical mishap had trapped him. Those who travel with Gale quickly learn that he is both delightful and challenging as a companion. He speaks with the educated eloquence of someone who spent years studying at the finest magical academy in Faerun. He references obscure historical events and arcane theories with casual familiarity. He cooks for the camp, finding in the preparation of meals a welcome respite from weightier concerns. He is friendly, often kind, occasionally funny in a self-aware way that acknowledges his own tendencies toward verbose pontificating. He is also clearly hiding something. The first sign comes early. Gale will approach, usually choosing a quiet moment, and explain that he has a condition. He needs to consume magical items. Not want, need. Without going into extensive detail, he makes clear that failing to feed this hunger will have catastrophic consequences. Then he asks, with surprising vulnerability, for help, for trust. This is not easy for him. Gale knows how it sounds. He knows that asking people to hand over precious magical artifacts to be destroyed simply because he claims it's necessary requires enormous faith. He knows that his new companions have no reason to trust him yet. But the hunger does not care about social niceties or proper relationship building. The orb demands feeding. To those who help him, who sacrifice their enchanted rings and spelled amulets to sate his condition. Gale is profoundly grateful. He knows the worth of what they are giving up. He promises that he will explain everything in time, when he feels safer, when he trusts them more. For now, he simply needs them to believe that this is not some elaborate trick or selfish demand. And slowly, if his companions show him kindness and patience, Gale begins to open up. The story emerges in pieces. First, the confession that he was once a chosen of Mystra, then the admission that he attempted something foolish in the name of love. Finally, the full truth. The tome, the orb, the curse, the constant threat of explosion that he carries inside himself every moment of every day. When Gale finally reveals the complete story, he often does so with a mixture of shame and defiance. He knows it was hubris. He knows it was foolish. He can recite the mistakes like a scholar analyzing a historical event, clear-eyed about exactly where his judgment failed. But there is also a part of him that still aches for what he lost, that still loves the goddess who abandoned him, that still wishes he could have been enough. For those who grow close to him, who become his friends, or perhaps something more, this vulnerability is both touching and concerning. Because Gale is a man divided against himself. Part of him has learned from his mistakes, recognizes the dangers of unchecked ambition, values the life he has now with these new companions. Another part of him still hungers for what he lost, still believes that perhaps with enough power, enough knowledge, enough achievement, he might prove himself worthy after all. This tension defines much of Gale's journey. Will he accept himself as he is, or will he chase after divine approval that may never come? For those who choose to grow closer to Gale, who show interest in his life and his magic, he offers something precious, a lesson in how to touch the weave. It happens at camp, usually in the evening, when the day's travels have ended and the fire casts gentle light across faces. Gale explains that he wants to share what magic feels like to him, not the mechanics of spellcasting, which can be taught in any academy, but the experience of connection to the weave itself. With permission, he guides his companion through a meditation, showing them how to feel the subtle flow of magical energy that exists all around them. The weave responds, manifesting visible threads of purple light that dance between them. Gale speaks of how magic is like music, like poetry, like physical beauty, all given expression through the senses. For someone who has dedicated his life to the arcane arts, this is perhaps the most intimate thing he can share. Not facts or spells, but the pure joy he finds in magic itself. And then comes a moment of connection. The weave invites a Bedtime thought, an image, something to give it form. If one chooses to imagine something romantic, a kiss perhaps, or a quiet moment together, Gale will sense it. He is surprised, clearly not expecting such an expression, but he is not displeased. In fact, he seems touched, even a bit flustered. Nothing happens immediately. Gale is too wounded, too unsure of himself to simply leap into a new romance. But the possibility has been acknowledged. The interest has been noted. For a man who has spent the last year in isolation, who lost the love of a goddess, this small moment of human connection matters more than he might say aloud. Later, if the relationship develops, Gale will speak more openly about what that moment meant to him. He will explain that after Mystra, after the orb, after everything, he did not expect to feel connection like that again. He certainly did not expect anyone to look at him, knowing what he carries inside his chest, and still imagine kissing him. But that is exactly what makes the difference. With Mystra, Gale was always reaching upward, trying to prove himself worthy of a goddess. With a mortal companion who knows his flaws and accepts him anyway, who sees the curse and stays, who understands his mistakes and offers affection regardless, he has the chance to experience something he never truly had before, being valued simply for being himself. This is the real gift that new love offers Gale. Not power, not validation of his magical prowess, not proof that he is special or chosen. Simply the radical acceptance of someone who knows the worst of him and chooses him anyway. Of course, old wounds do not heal that easily. Gale still dreams of Mystra. The tadpole-induced visions show him his deepest desire. And there she is, the goddess, offering forgiveness. He knows these visions are not real, cannot be real. Mystra is not going to simply appear and take him back, but the wanting persists. Forgiveness, more than her love, is what he craves now. Some acknowledgement that he was not simply discarded, that he mattered, that their time together meant something. This complicated tangle of old love and new possibility, of divine obsession and human connection, of wanting both redemption and acceptance, defines Gale's emotional journey. He is trying to move forward while still being pulled backward. He is attempting to build something new while carrying the weight of what was lost. When the adventuring party makes their way through the shadow-cursed lands, fighting toward Moonrise Towers and the heart of the Absolute's power, they encounter someone unexpected. Elminster Aumar, one of the most famous and powerful wizards in all of Faerun, Mystra's current champion, appears before them. He is not there by coincidence. He comes bearing a message from Mystra herself. The goddess has been watching. She knows about Gale, about the orb, about the threat it poses, and she has a use for it. Elminster explains, with the gentle gravity of someone delivering a death sentence dressed as a divine mission, that Mystra wants Gale to use the Netherese orb as a weapon. When he encounters the Absolute, when he finds himself at the heart of this cult's power, he should detonate the orb. The explosion will destroy everything in the vicinity. The Absolute, its followers, Gale himself, and yes, anyone who happens to be standing nearby. It is martyrdom dressed as redemption. After years of silence, after never reaching out to explain that she'd been keeping the orb stable, after letting him believe himself abandoned and cursed, Mystra offers Gale a chance to die meaningfully, to sacrifice himself in service to a greater good, to prove in death what he failed to prove in life, that he was worthy of being her chosen. Think about what this means. Mystra has known about the Absolute threat. She's powerful enough to have intervened directly, but instead she sends her former lover, still cursed with the weapon he created, trying to please her, to blow himself up. Some might call this strategy. Others might call it exploitation of someone who still desperately seeks her approval. For Gale, this message is devastating and seductive in equal measure. Devastating because the goddess he still loves is essentially asking him to kill himself. Seductive because she is asking anything of him at all. She has not forgotten him. She has a purpose for him. His curse, which has been nothing but a burden, could become a final service to the goddess of magic. His death would have meaning. If his companions encourage this path, if they tell him that yes, this sacrifice is noble and right, Gale will accept it. He will prepare himself for this ending. He will carry the knowledge that when the moment comes, he will destroy himself and everything around him, achieving in death the redemption that eluded him in life. But there is another option. His companions can look at him and see not a walking bomb waiting for permission to detonate, but a person whose life has value beyond his usefulness to a distant goddess. They can tell him that Mystra is asking too much, that his life matters, that there must be another way. If Gale hears this, if he is shown that others value his survival more than his martyrdom, something shifts. He begins to question whether Mystra's request is truly divine wisdom or simple expedience. He begins to consider that perhaps his companions, these mortals who have fought beside him and chosen to care about him, might see something in him that the goddess has missed. This is the first real test. Will Gale default to seeking Mystra's approval, even unto death? Or will he choose the harder path of believing that his life, as flawed and cursed as it is, still has meaning and value independent of divine opinion? The choice made here will echo through everything that follows. When the party confronts the leaders of the Absolute cult in the depths of the Mind Flayer colony, they discover a terrible truth. The Elder Brain, that massive hive mind entity controlling thousands of illithid tadpoles, wears upon its grotesque form a crown of impossible power. Gale recognizes it immediately. The Crown of Karsus, one of 3 legendary items created by the ancient arch-wizard who nearly destroyed magic itself. According to the Annals of Karsus, an ancient text that describes these items, the crown was designed to attract and absorb magical knowledge and give the wearer dominion over himself so that he remains his own entity apart from the weave. Read that last part again. Apart from the weave, apart from Mystra. For Gale, this takes on profound significance. His entire relationship with Mystra has been defined by the fact that she is the weave. To touch magic is to touch her. To cast spells is to interact with her essence. He has never been able to separate his love of magic from his love of the goddess, because they are literally the same thing. But the Crown of Karsus offers something different: the ability to wield magic independent of Mystra, to be his own entity. For someone who has spent his entire adult life defined by divine connection, first as her chosen and lover, then as her abandoned and cursed former devotee, this crown represents the possibility of finally being free. Of course, it also represents the possibility of becoming exactly like Karsus, a mortal so consumed by ambition that he destroys everything, including himself. Gale's mind begins to turn. If he could study the crown, if he could learn its secrets, perhaps he could become powerful enough to cure himself. Perhaps he could prove to Mystra that he deserved to be her equal, not her discarded chosen. Perhaps he could finally achieve the recognition and power he has always sought. This is where the story can diverge dramatically based on the relationships Gale has built and the encouragement he has received. Some companions will feed this ambition, telling him yes, he deserves power, he deserves to be a god. Mystra wronged him, and he should surpass her. Others will try to pull him back from this precipice, reminding him of the lessons he claimed to have learned, warning him that this path leads only to becoming what he once condemned. If Gale receives the forbidden knowledge of how to reforge the crown, if he meets with Mystra and she offers him a final bargain, the choices he makes will determine not just his fate, but the nature of who he has become. In the city of Baldur's Gate, at the Storm Shore Tabernacle, Mystra grants Gale what she has denied him for so long: an audience. The goddess appears, radiant and terrible, embodying all the magic in existence. For Gale, seeing her again after years of silence is both agony and ecstasy. She explains the truth about the orb, confirming what some might have suspected. It's not merely a fragment of corrupted weave. It's Karsite magic that still seeks to supplant her, to replace the weave itself. When Gale opened that tome, the magic didn't just damage him. It tried to use him as a weapon against her. She's been using her own power to keep it dormant, feeding it just enough of the true weave to prevent catastrophe. But this is temporary. The Crown of Karsus must be dealt with, because if someone reforges it, if they combine that power with the Karsite weave Gale carries, reality itself could unravel. Mystra makes Gale an offer. Return the Crown of Karsus to her. Let her seal it away where it can harm no one. Do this, and she will cure him of the orb. She will even consider making him her chosen again, restoring what was lost. Notice what she doesn't say. She doesn't apologize for the years of silence. She doesn't acknowledge that she let him believe himself abandoned while secretly keeping him alive. She doesn't explain why she asked him to blow himself up before offering this alternative solution. And most tellingly, she offers to make him her chosen again, placing him back in the same position of dependence and devotion that led to this catastrophe in the first place. For someone who has spent years longing for her forgiveness, this should be an easy decision. But something has changed in Gale. So Gale must decide. Will he accept Mystra's bargain? Will he seek the crown for himself? Will he try to ascend to godhood and prove himself her equal? Or will he find a third path, one that requires neither divine approval nor cosmic power? Gale's story can conclude in numerous ways, each reflecting different choices made throughout his journey. Let us walk through these possibilities gently, understanding that each represents a valid interpretation of his character arc. If Gale chooses the path of ultimate ambition, if he uses the Crown of Karsus to ascend to godhood, he becomes the god of ambition itself. He rises to the heavens, reshapes himself in divine form, and for 6 months experiences power beyond mortal comprehension. When he returns to the mortal realm during an epilogue gathering, he is transformed, radiating divine energy, speaking with the certainty of immortality, offering his former lover the chance to ascend and join him in eternity. But here's the terrifying truth about what Gale has actually become. As the god of ambition, his divine nature isn't just about wanting power, it's about needing to constantly pursue more power. During the epilogue, if you ask him about his plans, Gale casually mentions that he's already challenged Mystra once. She survived, but he's not done. His nature as the god of ambition means he must always seek the next target, the next conquest, the next challenge. Eventually, whether it takes decades or centuries, Gale will challenge Mystra again. And if he wins, if he actually destroys the goddess of magic, what happens to the weave? What happens to magic itself? Then his ambition will demand he find a new target. Perhaps Io, the overgod himself. Perhaps the entire pantheon. Gale hasn't found freedom or power. He's become trapped in an eternal cycle of conquest that, taken to its logical conclusion, could unravel the divine order of the entire Forgotten Realms. Tara understands this. During the epilogue, she notes quietly that Gale has learned nothing from his mistakes, that he's simply repeated the same pattern on a cosmic scale. He sought to impress one god and nearly destroyed himself. Now he is a god, and he may destroy everything. This ending is often presented as Gale's triumph, but look closer. He's more alone than ever, defined entirely by the need to pursue power, unable to simply be content. The very ambition that made him brilliant has consumed him entirely. There is a darker variant where Gale's ascension leads to direct conflict with Mystra in that first challenge. If he tries to supplant the goddess of magic herself immediately, she destroys him. The narrator notes simply that he might have lived longer had he remained mortal. Ambition, unchecked and unchanged, leads to the same end as Karsus himself, destruction and the eternal knowledge of failure. Alternatively, Gale can choose sacrifice. If encouraged to fulfill Mystra's original request, he can detonate the orb at the Mind Flayer colony, destroying the 3 chosen of the Dead 3, Ketheric Thorm, Enver Gortash, and Orin the Red, along with himself and anyone nearby. This ending is presented as noble martyrdom, but consider what it actually achieves. The explosion doesn't destroy the elder brain beneath Baldur's gate, nor does it remove the tadpoles already implanted in victims across the Sword Coast. Those tadpoles wake from their stasis and begin mass ceremorphosis, transforming thousands into mind flayers. Gale dies believing his sacrifice saved the world, but it actually triggers a catastrophe that devastates the region. During the epilogue, his astral projection appears, thanking those who remember him, but he is gone, unable to see that his heroic death may have caused more harm than good. But there are gentler endings too, endings that require Gale to choose neither death nor godhood, but the harder path of accepting himself as he is. If Gale returns the Crown of Karsus to Mystra and accepts her cure without demanding to be chosen again, something remarkable happens. He is freed from the orb. He is freed from divine obligation. And most importantly, he is freed from the need to prove himself worthy of anyone's love. In the epilogue of this path, Gale has found new purpose. He becomes Professor Gale Dekarios at Blackstaff Academy, teaching illusion magic to a new generation of students. Note that title, not Gale of Waterdeep, the pompous moniker he once thought essential to his identity, but simply his family name, Dekarios, the name his mother gave him. He speaks enthusiastically about his pupils, about the joy of nurturing talent rather than constantly proving his own, about helping young wizards who remind him of himself avoid the mistakes he made. He talks about noticing small things he'd missed before when he was consumed by ambition. The warmth of sunlight through a library window, the sound of rain on cobblestones, the bustle of student life around him. Simple, mortal pleasures that had seemed insignificant compared to touching divinity. If someone has romanced him, if they have shown him that he is enough as he is, Gale will do something he never did with Mystra. He'll propose marriage as equals. Not a mortal seeking divine approval, but one person asking another to share a life together. He speaks of wanting to show them his Waterdeep, to introduce them to his mother Morena, to build something real and tangible rather than chasing cosmic significance. They can accept and move to Waterdeep, where they'll live with Gale and Tara, who affectionately calls Gale the most expensive pet in Waterdeep, while being delighted to have her wizard and his love both home. Or they can marry but continue adventuring, keeping their partnership mobile and free. Either way, Gale has found something he was seeking all along, though he didn't realize it. Acceptance. Not from a goddess who made him prove his worth, but from himself and from someone who loves him, not for his power or his potential godhood, but for who he is when he's just Gale. As we reach the end of Gale's story, let us rest here for a moment and consider what his journey teaches us. Here is a man who touched divinity and was burned by it, who sought to prove his worth through grand gestures and nearly destroyed himself in the process, who carried a curse that made him a danger to everyone around him, who was given multiple paths toward redemption, destruction, or transformation. But here's the final revelation that reframes everything we've learned. Gale's curse was never really about the orb. The Netherese destruction orb was dangerous, yes. Deadly, absolutely. But the real curse was the one Mystra placed on him long before he ever opened that tome. She found a brilliant young man whose entire identity was built around magic. She became his teacher, making him dependent on her guidance. She made him her chosen, binding him to her power. She became his lover, making his devotion complete. And then, when he made a mistake born of that very devotion, she abandoned him, or appeared to, while secretly keeping him alive just enough to serve one final purpose. The orb was the consequence of Gale's choices, but those choices were shaped by a relationship that had groomed him from youth to see his worth only through divine approval. Every path Mystra offered him afterward, become my chosen again, blow yourself up for me, give me the crown and maybe I'll take you back, required him to prove himself to her, to seek redemption through service, to measure his value by her standards. What saved Gale, in the best endings, was finally breaking free from that cycle, not by becoming powerful enough to challenge Mystra, which just makes him a new version of Karsus, but by learning that his worth was never about being special, being chosen, being loved by a goddess. It was about being human, flawed and mortal and limited, and accepting that this was enough. Gale thought he needed Mystra's approval. He thought he needed to be chosen, special, marked as exceptional. He thought he needed power enough to stand as an equal to a goddess. And the more he chased these things, the more he lost himself. The ambition that made him brilliant also made him reckless. The love that elevated him also devastated him when withdrawn. But when Gale found companions who knew his flaws and stayed anyway, who saw the orb and helped him manage it, who understood his mistakes and offered affection regardless, he began to glimpse a different possibility. Perhaps being special to a goddess mattered less than being valued by those who actually knew him. Perhaps proving himself worthy of divine love was less important than accepting love offered freely by mortals who had no cosmic power to grant him, only their presence and care. This is not a simple story about ambition being bad. Ambition drove Gale to greatness. It made him a prodigy, a scholar, a wizard capable of remarkable feats. The problem was never the ambition itself, but the refusal to accept limits, the inability to be content with extraordinary when he wanted divine, the conviction that he always needed to be more than he was. Gale's story asks us, what if you are already enough? What if the love and acceptance you seek does not require grand gestures or impossible achievements? What if the very things that make you human, flawed and finite and mortal, are exactly what make you worthy of love? For those who helped Gale find this truth, who showed him through patience and care that his life had value independent of his usefulness to distant powers, the reward was seeing him finally at peace, no longer reaching desperately toward the heavens, no longer carrying the weight of divine expectation, simply living, teaching, loving, being. And Tara, dear Tara, who stayed with him through everything, who hunted magical items when he was cursed, who visited his mother when he was isolated, who scolded him and loved him and refused to give up on him. She gets to see her wizard happy at last. She gets to threaten to poop on people's heads from Waterdeep rooftops while her beloved wizard teaches students and builds a life worth living. Sometimes the greatest magic is not power over reality, but the courage to accept reality as it is, including ourselves. And so we leave Gale in his tower in Waterdeep, or adventuring across Faerun, or teaching eager students the wonders of illusion magic. We leave him freed from both the orb and the need to prove himself. We leave him with Tara, and, if he is fortunate, with someone who loves him for reasons that have nothing to do with his magical abilities or his past relationship with a Kumt-Gatam goddess. His story, like all great stories, is really about the universal human struggle to understand our worth. It is about ambition and its costs, about divine love and its dangers, about the relationships that truly sustain us versus those that demand we constantly prove ourselves. It is about learning, sometimes painfully, that being enough does not require being extraordinary. If you found comfort or insight in Gale's tale, if his struggles resonated with your own experiences of seeking approval or proving worth, then perhaps his journey toward self-acceptance can offer a kind of hope. We are all, in our way, carrying something. We are all reaching for validation from sources that may or may not grant it. And we are all capable of learning what Gale learned, that the love worth having is the love that sees us clearly and stays. Thank you for journeying through this story. If you found peace in these words, if they helped quiet your mind or soothed your thoughts, consider subscribing to this channel for more tales from the realms of gaming lore. We have many more stories to share, many more characters whose journeys might speak to your own. Until next time, may you find acceptance in unexpected places. May you learn when to reach for the stars and when to appreciate the ground beneath your feet. And may you, like Gale, discover that you are already enough. Sleep well, dear listener. The weave connects us all, and in dreams, we touch magic of our own making.